Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our three-part series, Ethics and Law in Judaism. Tonight is February the 1st, 2005, here at the Seaport Marina Hotel. Tonight is the first of the three-part series, and tonight's lecture will concern ourselves with the recent tsunami that unfortunately took place at the end of last year. And I think the name of the lecture is going to be The Tsunami, Was It Nature's Fury or Was God's Hand in It? This is not an easy topic to speak about because it includes many painful ideas, and certainly it even touches upon some of the most fundamental issues that we have within religion itself. I cannot tell you that at the end of tonight's lecture we're going to come out with an answer to this question that's going to be perfect and that's going to have no holes being able to be shot into it, and everybody's going to go home satisfied. This is an issue that has been thought about and debated since time immemorial by philosophers greater than I. And it will be debated by philosophers greater than I in the future. But as a starting point, to get us going in tonight's lecture, I would like to first start talking about the general idea of good and evil within the world. And then we'll get to the point of the present day and the situation that took place in Southeast Asia with the tsunami. In the first chapters of Genesis, we have a story about two brothers, Cain and Abel. Everybody's familiar with the story if you went to Hebrew school or you went to any kind of a Bible study class. You know, one of the first stories, there's four people living on the world. There's two brothers, Cain and Abel. They don't get along. They don't get along. But to the point where ultimately Cain raises up and kills Abel. Literally kills him. Well, that's not such a good thing. God, before this act, had approached Cain. And he said to him, listen, my friend, a human being is a complicated animal. Inside of him, there's many emotions and many things going on within the human being. And you, as my creation, have choices in life. And I want to quote. This is chapter 4 in Genesis, and it is verse number 6. I'm going to pick up the narrative. This is before the murder. Cain and Abel are having these differences about the sacrifices that they brought. Cain didn't bring such a good sacrifice. Abel brought a good sacrifice. God showed favor to Abel's sacrifice, and he showed disfavor to Cain's sacrifice. So Cain is upset. He's angry. He's marching. Okay. God says to Cain, why are you annoyed? And why has your countenance falling? Now here's the key verse. Verse number 7. Surely, if you improve yourself, you will be forgiven. But if you do not improve yourself, sin rests at the door. Its desire is toward you, yet you can conquer it. And I think this verse encapsulates the entire idea of what the Torah is here for. Because in this verse, God tells mankind in the form of Cain that you have choices. There is good and there is evil. There exists good and evil in the world. And you have a choice. You can either allow the evil to overtake you and to lead you into that dark path, which Cain is soon going to follow, or, as God says, its desire is towards you. It's always lurking, always asking you, it's seducing you to come forward. Yet, you can conquer it. Because you have within yourself the capacity to overcome that which evil demands you to do. Why did God create human beings such, with the capacity of good and evil? Well, we come to this analogy. Who here in the room likes ice cream? Okay, 2 people don't like ice cream, but the vast preponderance of people like ice cream in the room. How many people in the room enjoy ice cream that they would like to eat it like once a month? You know, once every 2 weeks. It's people like ice cream. Okay? How many people here would like me to do a tap dance on their windpipe? Let it show that nobody wants me to do a tap dance on their windpipe. People would not be happy if I did that. Okay? Why? Because it would be painful, right? And it would be evil of me to do that. So if I walked in here with a bucket of ice cream and I said, everybody come on up, we'd have a straight line here, okay, be nice, sit down, listen, don't fall asleep, and you get a scoop of ice cream, no one would deny that they're in for it. Okay, except for 2 people here, they don't want ice cream. But we'll find something they do like, all right? Most people, 90% of people are up, no problem. Okay, everybody here, I want to kick you in the head. No one's standing up. Why? Because we as human beings have been trained that what we do for goodness and for pleasure will follow, but pain and evil will stay away from. Right? That's what you've been taught early on. A fire is a very good thing. But if you put your finger in the fire, it's not such a good thing. The truth of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, you can't have the ice cream without the kick. It just doesn't work that way. If you want to have the pleasure of experiencing life, if you want to have the pleasure of watching your children grow and do the most cutest and funniest things in the world, and coming home with that great report card with all A's, you also have to be ready for them to come with an F. That's the way the world works. Because if we didn't have the F's in the world, and we didn't have the disappointments in the world, and we didn't have all of these things that cause us pain, we wouldn't understand the pleasure. Ice cream would mean nothing for us. Absolutely nothing. So God, in His ultimate kindness and His ultimate wisdom, created the world in such a way that we human beings go through experiments and existential things in life in order for us to experience pleasure, which we want to do most of the time, but at the same time, God allows us also to experience pain. And the pain comes from that part of God which emanates, that we call either pain or evil or a number of different ways that you could describe this. And we all understand that. Who likes to live? We all love life. We all love life. We love to live. Anybody want to die? No. I mean, very few people, who join the Hemlock Society, they're willing to die. They want to cash it in early. Right? But most people want to live another day, another week, another month. You want to see things happening in your life. We live, and we love to live, but we all know that ultimately everybody is going to bite the bullet. No one has been able to escape that thing called death. And the reason that we enjoy life so much is because we know that we are only here for a short period of time. 80, 90, whatever years, healthy years. But eventually, we're not going to have it. So therefore, in the few precious years that we do have, we better, if we want to live, we better wake up in the morning running, experiencing life, living life, doing the things we want to do. Because down the line, there's going to be that evil, grim reaper that is going to come and is going to take us. And we all understand this. And everybody buys into this. The problem is when the evil happens to us. Because theologically and philosophically, when it's out there, we all buy it, sure, no problem. But when we, God forbid, experience death in a family member, then it's not that easy to explain. But leaving that aside, we understand that this is the way the world works. There's going to be good people, there's going to be bad people, there's going to be good things happening to you, and there's going to be bad things happening to you. And you hope and pray to the Almighty, if that is the form of worship that you desire, that only good things should happen to you. But realistically, that down the line, when it was Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and God looked at your account, He said into your account, you know what? This is a pretty good guy, but I'm going to give him sustenance, but I'm really going to make him work hard at it. I'm going to really make him really go through the ringer. He's going to make his $100,000 a year, but he's going to have to work hard. He's going to lose this account, he'll have to pick up that account. I mean, we'll get there. But while we get there, you're going to go through the meat grinder a little. And that leads me to the second issue of what we talk about good and evil. Because through the years, since we want to believe that God is good and benevolent, and in Judaism, if you look through the books, you will always find Kel Rachum, God of mercy, God of kindness, God of compassion, you are our Father. So why does He make us do this? Because we want to believe that all of this suffering that we have in this world makes us stronger. It makes us better people. That we wouldn't know how good we are unless we went through a little bit of difficulty. Because if everything is given to you in a silver spoon, if your parents are the kind of people that don't want you to do anything, and God forbid would even allow you to walk on a cold floor, no, God forbid you have to have your slippers on, you have to do this, God forbid you should miss a meal, and then have 2 or 3 snacks during the day, all of these things, you will never know what you can really accomplish in life. Because everything is given to you. And one of the worst things we know that you can do to your children is take away what we call incentive. Give them $1 million, give them $1 billion, give them 10 billion, whatever it is. But if you don't allow your children to experience and to grow, it's never going to happen. They're never going to amount to anything. So we know, and through our life, that if we want to do something, whether it's sports, or whether it's in academics, or whether it's in business, or no matter what field that you're in, the tougher it gets, that which is inside of you comes to the forefront. So, if you're like my friend Paul, who likes a challenge in our office with all of those automated machines we have, with computers, I see one thing in Paul. Paul sees a challenge, he wants to get to the bottom of it. He's not going to let that machine, that computer, get him the best of him. He's going to tackle it until it gets done. Now, we could think about this and say, why does Paul have to go through such a tough time? Why every 5 minutes is there no internet connection? This is down, that's down, the email is down. Why? Because if it wasn't, we would never really know how good Paul is in what he does. Now we know that even under the worst circumstances, we know that we have Paul on our speed dialing, we get the phone, we look at Paul, hurry over, okay, and he's ready to tackle the problem. So some people have, of course, come up with a whole theology of our suffering is actually a benefit to us. Because otherwise, we would never know how good we really are. As you probably know, I'm a sports fan. I love following sports. I don't know why, maybe when I was a kid, it took me away from all the other dreary things that we had around in life. So following sports, it was easy in Montreal with the Canadians winning cup after cup after cup. It was great. But you know what? In sports, you see the same thing is true. You'll never achieve the highest level of what you can do without really sacrificing and suffering. Now, when I mean suffering, I mean going out there day after day. When we were playing hockey, it was cold in the morning, 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. I didn't do this because we were Jewish kids. Are you crazy? 4 o'clock in the morning. We could only skate when it was above 32, when the ice was melting, because God forbid you could get hurt. But the people who were really dedicated to hockey, we had some French-Canadian families on our block that 4 o'clock in the morning they were up with their kids and they were shoveling up the pond and they were out there skating. Who wants to be out there 4 o'clock in the morning? What are you, nuts or something? What are you, crazy? But that brings out the better of you. So the more, no pain, no gain, right? So from where we started, from Cain and Abel, all the way back in the first story of where, he killed his brother and he was angry. From this, we learn, hey, pain is a good thing. And if you use it in the proper direction, it can make you really, really, really strong. Okay? So religion came up with this theology, and it makes sense, and for everybody understands that in the world we're not going to get away unless you live in with some rosy-colored glasses, that this world is going to be perfect. It doesn't work that way. There's always going to be evil. So when we see people doing harm to somebody else, like shooting somebody or murdering something, our first reaction is, oh God, how could this happen? But think about this for one moment. What we just said here. Oh God, how could this happen? How can it happen? Because God created, in the first book of Genesis, good and evil. So he created this murderer, and this murderer has free choice, and he picked up the gun and he shot the other guy. But why couldn't God save him? Of course. Why couldn't God have saved him? God could have saved him. But here we have, he's talking to Cain. Why couldn't he have come to Cain? The same question, why couldn't he have saved Abel? And all of the things, Abel was right there, was a good guy, dedicated to God, because that's the way God created the world. We want to have pleasure. You want to be able to dance at your daughter's wedding, and it's the greatest feeling. At my daughter's wedding, it was, I can't even begin to describe what feeling it was. And then the birth of Shmuley, my grandson, forget about it. Forget about it. But at the same time, my mother breaks her hip. and is in the hospital. I get a call from my sister. We have to rush to Montreal. She's in the emergency room. My heart is already beating. My father was a nice guy, died of cancer. Okay, I say, oh gosh, Hashem, come on. Couldn't my father, he didn't bother anybody. My father was the quietest, humblest guy in the world. He didn't bother anybody. He couldn't live another 10 years. Sure, he could have lived the 10 years. But if you want to have the joy of seeing my grandson born, and you want to dance at your daughter's wedding, there's always that balance in the world. We're going to be a death in the family and all of these things. We pray and hope that we have more of the joy of the dancing and the birth of grandchildren than of death in the family. But that's the way Hashem created the world. Now, a much more difficult theological problem, to me at least, is not so much when people do harm to each other, because that I can accept. I walk down the street, a guy punches me in the nose. I understand, it's a bad guy, I stay away from him. That I could accept. I don't say to God, why did I get a punch in the nose? All right, I probably deserve it, although I'm not saying I want to blame the victim, but yeah, probably something, I blasphemed or something. So this guy was chosen to punch me in the nose. Thank God it wasn't Mike Tyson. Some other shrimp did that. But I'm not talking about blaming the victim. I don't want to go there. But a bigger theological problem that we have is when we are hit with a story like the tsunami, which is not person against person, but when it's nature against people. Now, that, my friends, is much harder to reconcile, because here our people are sitting comfortably and enjoying a sunny day at the seashore. Many of them are vacationers and they've gone down and they're there with their families. And if anybody has seen the footage of it and have read the stories, no words can describe it. What can you say to a mother who has to make a choice between holding on to one of her kids, because it's impossible. There's no words. Absolutely a loss of words to describe the tragedy and the devastation that took place there in Southeast Asia. And we should never have to experience this in our lives. But it wasn't done by human beings. This was done by a force of nature. And we've had throughout history many of these occurrences, unfortunately, whether it's in Southeast Asia, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in America, no matter where it is. Nature comes along and then all of a sudden, in a kind of a correction, boom, 25, 50,000 people, 100,000 people, 1 million people are gone. Stalin, remember Joseph Stalin from your history books, the leader of Russia? Joseph Stalin once said, 1 death is murder. 1 million deaths is a statistic. Think about that for just a moment. 1 is murder, because we can relate to that one guy. 1 million, what do you say? There was 150,000 people killed for the tsunami. We can't even begin to realize what 150,000 people is. That's like the whole Rose Bowl and a half. If you took the whole Rose Bowl, filled it up with people, and then another half of a Rose Bowl, and then all of a sudden said, okay, come on now, it's over, and these people all of a sudden disappeared. 150,000 people. It's a statistic. It's a statistic. Our minds cannot fathom that. There, my friends, comes in really the theological problem that we are about to embark upon. Because if we believe that God is a benevolent God, and God is omnipotent, and God is omniscient, and He knows everything, and can do everything, and can stop everything, and is kind, because the key word here is kind. Because if you believe God is a petty God and He's an angry God, then okay, so you have an angry God, and every once in a while He lets His anger go. But if you believe in Judaism that God is a benevolent God, He cares about human beings, He loves human beings like His own children, how can He allow this to happen? How can He sit by and cause a tsunami to happen, and all of a sudden within a matter of hours 150,000 people are wiped out and have a good day, Shalom al Yisrael, and it's over? That's been a problem that's been really, really dogging the minds of philosophers and religious leaders since the days of Abraham. And tonight, I want to discuss 4 separate approaches to this problem. The first 3 are not really my own opinion, but they're opinions of many people throughout the world. And the 4th, we'll try to wrap up with, I think, what is the traditional Jewish view of what we're talking about. The first one I would describe as Spinoza. Okay? Spinoza, who talked about the power of nature and the power of pantheism. That there is no personal God really out there. Those things that we think about, that there is a guy sitting there on a throne with a long white beard, with droopy eyes, and he watches the world with a bunch of angels standing around him, is a fantasy that was made up by human beings. There's no such thing. God is nature, and nature is God. Pantheism. That's the way it goes. So forget about your notion of somebody there controlling the world. This whole idea of a supernatural being that was here before us and is knowledgeable and knows what's going on. This was created by men of feeble minds. They needed something to hang their hats on. The olden days when people were silly and they were unsophisticated and didn't know any better, and a rainstorm came and it wiped them out. So they must have thought, ooh, somebody is angry at them. Somebody out there is up there. So there's got to be something more than we. So what does he do? He creates this fantasy called God and heaven and other things, and he portrays him and he puts him up in the heavens, and that's it. But this we all know. If I'm Spinoza, I argue, we know that this is unsophisticated people. These are barbarians. These are people that were lived a long time ago. They didn't know in science what we know. We know that we don't have to come on to this. We know that there's a world, there's science, we study, we're critical thinkers, we can understand. And then what do the people do? So in order for people to follow along in this idea that there is a supreme being and we have to follow along, otherwise he gets angry and he shakes his fist at us, and we have rains and thunderstorms and we have earthquakes and we have hurricanes and all of the disasters of nature. They wrote us a little Bible. And the Bible, they kept the feeble-minded people down. They said, hey, you know what? Hey, psst, come here. You want to stay out of God's wrath? You want to be a good guy? You want God to shine his emotions and to smile upon you? Here, read this. Take this. Read it every day. Follow along. And you're going to be A-okay. So we have these little stories about Abraham walking with 3 angels, and he makes bread for them and breakfast for them. Now, what does that story come in to tell us? Why did 3 angels visit Abraham after he circumcised himself? To teach us that we should be good to each other. It's like pablum to a baby. If you ever had a baby, you can't feed it a steak right away. You're going to give it a steak? No, come on, it has to grow up, has to have teeth to appreciate a steak. So what you do is you take a little cereal, you mush it with milk, you push it around, and then this little pablum you stick into its mouth so it to eat. That's not real food. Anybody here wants to eat this? I'm going to bring in here some isomil. Anybody? Forget about it. You want to eat those little cans of the beef? I used to every once in a while sneak it when my kids were little and they didn't finish. I would sneak a little, but that was only when I was really hungry on Yom Kippur. Not on Yom Kippur, I meant after Yom Kippur. After Yom Kippur, you let it that out. Okay, next thing. So therefore, no one wants to. So that Spinoza argues, and many atheists agree, that this is all like a kind of a fantasy thing. That basically this was created for people of small minds. So we tell them stories like Abraham to make them feel better, and and then comes along Moses, and he splits the Red Sea. So we all walk through, and it's a brotherhood. Ho ho ho. Has anybody here ever seen the Red Sea split? Has anybody here ever seen a plague? Like grasshoppers rolling around? No. We've never seen, because this is in the Bible. Spinoza says it's all to keep the small-minded people happy. You tell them simple stories and, earthquakes, plagues, and that's the way it is. But we're sophisticated Americans. We don't need this. We understand that this is what you get. You see me? I am the highest form of what we call the world creation, human. That's the way it is. There's nobody up there. There's nothing going on in heaven. I'm it. And since I'm it, what we have is called statistics. That's the way it works. We know in America now, if you're going to smoke, it's a good chance that you're going to get lung cancer, and a certain percentage of smokers are going to die. Doesn't mean that every smoker is going to die. No. But a good chance if you smoke, you're a statistic. Doesn't mean that God shows you, okay, you know what? You smoke 2 packs, you smoke 2 packs, I'm going to pick you. That's the way it goes. We know a certain number of people are going to die by car accidents. Government can tell you, based upon how many cars there are, how many drivers there are in America. We do statistical analysis, and we know that 300,000 people are going to die by cars. If one of you should, God forbid, die by a car accident, It's not because somebody up there in heaven wrote down, okay, today, Mr. This is going to die. But no. What happened was, you're one of those 300,000 people, and your number is up, and we feel sorry for you. But you know what? You're going down where everybody else goes, down into the ground. There's nothing else. There's nothing up there. There's nothing down there. The worms crawl in. The worms crawl out. The worms play pinochle on. That's it. And that's the way it is, according to them, to the atheists. And finished. Have a good day. You lived a good life. You had some fun here on earth, but don't expect anything else. And please don't tell me that up there after you die, there is up in heaven, you're going to go to the celestial palace, and if you were a goody and you didn't do anything wrong, you're going to get the seat right next to Moses, and you're going to be able to eat corned beef sandwich for eternity and not gain an ounce. All right? So this is what atheists argue. This is the one way to solve this theological problem. So there is no God, and you're a statistic, and unfortunately for these people, we know that the earth shifts every once in a while, and if you're a geologist, you probably have statistical information to tell us where and when, although it's hard to predict this, but we're sorry to tell you. Your number was up, and if it wasn't going to be you in Indonesia, it was going to be somebody else in Sierra Leone, or somebody else in Argentina, and somebody else in Siberia, and somebody else in London, Paris, and Washington. Sorry, I hate to burst your bubble, but this is all you get. Finished. Now this is not very comforting to me, to be honest to you. It's very, because just to label a human being a number, and just to give them like a statistical position in the world, doesn't mean anything, because that rips out, from as far as I'm concerned, every effort that I make to be a decent, good human being. Why? For what reason? Just because I should be a good guy? I can't buy that. I can't buy that. And history has shown us, and society has shown us, that without a very determined and fundamental belief that there is absolute right and wrong, not because I say so, not because we in the room have agreed that killing is bad, no, but there's an absolute idea that killing is wrong, that God has told us that killing is bad, even though sometimes I'd like to kill some of my students, I would ask questions, I want to kill them, but I say to myself, hold back, not because I'm a nice guy. I might not be a nice guy, because the Almighty, there is an absolute being that tells me that killing is wrong. And this is really the fault of why we can never accept atheism, or humanistic Judaism, that God doesn't play a part, because without that absolute moral standing, absolute, unchangeable at all times and to everybody, like we read the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not murder, we don't have it. And the greatest proof is what we saw 60 years ago with the Nazi movement. And the Nazis who were not barbarians, the Nazis who were not uncivilized, the Nazis did not come from somewhere like Attila the Hun, riding over, or Genghis Khan riding over the steppes and the plains and the mountains that came in. No. These were very sophisticated people. This is the same culture that gave us Beethoven, that gave us philosophers, that gave us writers, that gave us all of these things. And yet these same people came to the conclusion that murder was okay. Why? Because they had missed the absolute truth and belief in the Almighty that killing and murder is wrong, regardless. Now, so therefore, the position of atheism, the position that there is no God and that we're all statistics, has to be rejected. Because if it's not rejected, what will happen is we will live in utter chaos, I believe. If this country had taken a position that we're officially atheists, forget about it. Everybody is going to just eat up everybody else. That's what's going to happen. There's nothing to talk about. But the fact that we do have a fear of heaven, the fact that we have some kind of a belief system in the Almighty, therefore keeps this country, I believe so. Now, we'll get to that in a moment, exactly what our belief system is going to be, because not everybody in this country believes in God the same way. But at least for this time right now, let's reject outright this idea called atheism. So now that we find ourselves in the camp of the deists, we find ourselves now in the camp of the believers, the theist. We believe that there is a God. We believe now that there is a God, and how I define God is not an abstract notion, but a being, a primal cause, something, a spirit that absolutely knows what it's doing. You see, you could say, well, there's a God. He's a little samished. He's a little crazy. He doesn't really know what he's doing. He was kind of an experimenting and the world came into existence. I'm not talking about that kind of a God. I'm talking about a being that knows, understands, feels, and creates the world with a purpose. That kind of a God I'm talking about. A Jewish God. A God that gave us the Torah and said, live. So now that we believe this, now that we've accepted this position that there is a God and he's benevolent and he cares about us, why God? Why do you allow for 150,000 people to be wiped out? So, if you read the papers, and a lot of people have weighed in on this issue, there is in the Torah a famous chapter called the Shema. The Shema, we all know, the first sentence is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our Lord, the Lord is one. And goes on to say you should love the Lord and keep all of his commandments. It's followed by a second paragraph that says, if you will hearken to his voice, then God will cause the rains to come. The former rains, the latter rains, you will flourish, you will benefit, you will prosper, you will have grain, you will have wine, you will have everything that you should possibly want. But if you don't hearken to his voice, if you don't listen to his commandments, if you reject him and his statutes, then what I will do is I will cause the world to become desolate. I will punish you. Well, it's clearly in the book. I'm not making this up, am I? You've all read it, right? You know what it says in the book. This is a quid pro quo, baby. You know, you take the Torah, you follow the words of the Lord, I will bless you. You want to look at the end of Leviticus, the last chapters of Leviticus. But if you don't follow, if you reject me, if you despise me, what I will do is I will visit upon you every harsh element that there is in here. I will cause you to get sick. I will cause you to go barren. I will cause you to do all of these things, lose your life, get exiled. It says so in the good book. So when something like this happens, it's a punishment. Now, why did he pick Indonesia? Why did he pick Sri Lanka? Why did he pick Thailand? Why did he pick India? So if you look into these things, and if you look throughout the stories that were written about this, there's a number of things that these people have been doing that aren't right. Right? We can take a smorgasbord, go to a menu, go to Thailand. Have you ever been to Bangkok? One night in Bangkok and the world's your oyster. Right? That's what they say. You ever been to Bangkok? Bangkok is, the sex trade is rampant in Bangkok. Right? Where better place to get to punish the people than not by rejecting his rules and regulations on morality. Go to every place and you'll find something. Somebody somewhere has done something wrong. And therefore, God has visited his plague upon these people as a lesson to humanity, to show, to see, and to hear that we should better ourselves, that we need to strengthen this country which is immoral, this country which allows all this morality to run rampant. You watch television or you listen to the radio or you read the newspaper. It's only a matter of time before a tsunami happens here. So ladies and gentlemen, take this to heart, because you see what happened over there? It's about to happen over here unless we, the American people, turn back to the Almighty. Now, of course, the problem is, which Almighty are we talking about? Are we talking about the Baptist Almighty in Tennessee? Are we talking about the Catholic Almighty in Boston? Are we talking about the Jewish Almighty in Borough Park? Are we talking about the Muslim Almighty in Dearborn, Michigan? Are we talking about the Mormon Almighty in Utah? We don't know, but turn back. Because if you don't, according to this position, God will visit his anger upon you and upon your house and upon your children. And the proof is, the best proof is this book. Because when you read this book, every second page is God visiting his anger upon us. Right? If you don't listen, I will do this and I will do that. And then what happens? Pharaoh doesn't let the people go. What did he do to Pharaoh? Right? He gave him blood. He gave him pestilence. He gave him frogs. He killed his firstborn. He drowned him. Well, this was a quid pro quo, right? This is what happened. And then the Jews in the desert, they didn't listen to him. They didn't want to go into the land of Israel. What did he do to them? Struck them down for 40 years. He buried them. And then read through the prophets. of Isaiah and Jeremiah and all of these other prophets, the latter prophets. What happened when the Jewish people rejected God? God turned his back on the Jewish people. And what happened? The land became desolate. And when God's ire was against those that hurt his children, it's all in the Bible. I'm not making this up. So when a preacher gets up there and says, this is a punishment, know thee that this is a punishment, or like some other rabbi said, this is because Sharon is giving back land, therefore God destroyed Indonesia. Okay, I understand that. Because Sharon wants to pull out of Gaza, so God sends a tsunami to Indonesia. All right, okay, it makes perfect sense to me. Not, but that's the way it goes. Or, whatever it's going to be, whatever issue you want to take, that someone is against, this is what these people stand for. It's a pure 100% punishment. And if you want to dig a little bit deeper, there is one of the most interesting books that there is in the Bible is a book called Job. Has anybody ever read Job? From its beginning to the end? It's a long book. It's about 60 odd chapters long. And it's a very difficult book to read. Not only difficult in the sense of understanding, but it hurts. Why? Because here was a good man. Job was a fine, upstanding citizen. And he had everything going for him. He had 10 children. He was rich. Everything was going his way. And then one day Satan showed up and said, you think this guy's a real faithful servant, God? You think he really cares about you? Forget about it. He only loves you because things are going his way. Sure, who loves God when they win the California lottery, 38 million? Me, I do. Everybody loves God when you do that. But who loves God when things are going against you? We're angry at God, right? So let's check him out, man. Let's see. Come on, God. Give him a little test. So God said, okay, give him a little test, but the only thing is you can't kill him. So he takes him to that point. He kills his children. He destroys his wealth. He gets him sick. All for this little test. Now that itself throws you into a theological problem. How God could have allowed to do this to Job. He was a good guy. So, it made him stronger. At the end, he regains everything, but still, the pain that he has to go through, losing his children all in a matter of days, and his flock, and and he gets sick. So his 3 friends come to comfort him. He has 3 buddies. And Job is sitting there, he's in pain, he's sick, he's hurting, he's miserable. I mean, if anybody had a right to walk away from God and to turn his back, it was definitely Job. He had every reason to do this. And his friends come to comfort him. And from the words of comfort, if you read the story carefully, you find all of a sudden they're talking about condemning him. And they say to him, hey Job, come on, what'd you do wrong? What did I do wrong? I don't know. And they say, you must have done something wrong, because why would God visit all these sicknesses upon you? Why would God take your children? It has to be because you got the ire of God up. You got angry. It has to be. Otherwise it doesn't make any sense. Why should all of a sudden Satan comes along and God picks you and bingo, boom, 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 and all of a sudden you're down and out? Nah. Come on, Job, tell us. And Job was adamant. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't reject God. I didn't blaspheme. I didn't say anything. I'm a decent guy. And God then comes back later and he condemns the friends. And he tells the friends, you're lucky. Only for the sake of Job do I allow you to still alive. Because otherwise, how can you say something like this against my good buddy? But in their minds, they thought like all of us thought. You see a guy that's suffering, he must be a sinner. He's got to be. Otherwise, the world doesn't make any sense. The whole Shema doesn't make any sense. Why would a good guy suffer? So the book of Job also relates to us this situation of why good people sometimes suffer, and there's no good answer at the end of the book. You read the book and you scratch your head at the end and you say, okay, it's on one hand, it's a very uplifting, Job came through it. Many people claim that Job never really existed. That Job was not really a human being. That this was all an analogy that was written about this whole idea of why good people suffer and God visits upon them sickness. And in one way that's very comforting, because we don't want to think of God as being, hey, you know what, like they're up there and what if they're talking about me? What if Satan all of a sudden shows up and says, look at this Perelmuter guy. He's got a car that runs. He has a roof that doesn't leak. His plumbing works. What all of a sudden, what happens? Boom, my transmission goes out. I got a leak in the roof. my plumbing comes up, which has happened. All three of them, as a matter of fact. All three of them have happened to me. So why? I don't want to believe that this is God and Satan like playing roulette. Well, just talking, okay, who are we going to get? Oh, forget about that. I don't want to believe that happens. I want to believe that there's some order in the world, right? But yet, people, certainly in biblical times, and even today, want to live with this belief that, you know what? You're a good person, you're going to prosper. And if something bad happens to you, there's a book called Agnes of God. Okay? Agnes of God. And there's one sentence in there when the psychiatrist is talking, is explaining why she rejected religion. And you know why? Because when she was a kid and she went to Catholic school and her best friend was killed that morning, she went there and she told the Mother Superior and she said, you know, my best friend is... And the Mother Superior said, you know why she died? Because she didn't say her prayers this morning. And that left... Now, I'm not condemning any... Because this could have happened in any religion, to anybody, said by anybody. It just happens to be that this is a book written by Catholics. And the psychiatrist says that left such an impression upon her, such a bitter, angry impression that she could never again look into the face of God. How could God take a little girl because she forgot to say her prayers in the morning and kill her? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any theological, rational, logical sense to say that this is what happens. But we don't like to live in a disorderly world. We don't like to live in a world with loose ends. We like everything to be orderly. We like to understand. And we want to know, God, that if I follow the ways of the world, I want to know that you're going to shine your countenance upon me. And if you don't, I look inward. I look inside. What am I doing wrong? How do I better myself? And for some odd reason, these people in Indonesia today, according to this line of thinking, they did something wrong. Because that's the only logical explanation we can find if we are going to follow the rules of our description of the Almighty. That's the way it works. So, I'm sorry to say, you might not like it, and it might be a bitter pill, but many people believe this. That this is a pure punishment. And if you don't better ourselves, and if we don't clean house of ourselves here, and again, depending upon what part of the country, which denomination that you belong to, it's either going to be homosexual rights, or abortion, or no prayer in school, or whatever it is. We've taken God out of things, and it's this guy Nadov that's trying to get the words in God we trust off of our money, and out of our Pledge of Allegiance. And if we allow this to happen, what's going to happen? God is going to visit upon us worse punishment than the tsunami. Now, to many of us, I listen to this and I chuckle and I say, these guys, they're simple guys, but this, because I can't buy this. I can't buy the fact that, 19 terrorists come together in 4 planes and killed 2,500 people. It's a punishment on the United States of America. But that's the way they believe. The problem with this is, it doesn't bear it out. It doesn't, because we see people who are great. We see people who are good and still suffer. And we see people in the Holocaust, 1.5 million children. I don't care if you stand on your head and spit wooden nickels and talk about sin and punishment. There's no way, no rationale that could convince me that 1.5 million children going into a gas chamber is any way a reaction and a punishment from God. What did they suffer? And if you want to say, okay, but this was done by human beings, what about the tsunami natures? Still what? There were, how many kids were killed? They said an enormous amount of children. An inordinate amount, the percentage of children that died was something unbelievable. Because adults are stronger, could still save themselves. I mean, a little kid, you can imagine, and a tidal wave is just open for its open season. To me, it makes absolutely no sense. But the problem is, if you look in the book, how do we explain that? So we say, listen, there is no quid pro quo. I'm sorry, that just doesn't work in the world. Years ago, it was much easier. When I say years ago, I'm not talking about 50 years ago. I'm talking about biblical times, when there was a Moses. And sure, it was easier. Moses came out with the stick. He said, go here. We all marched. Then he said, go here. And we all marched here. They said, go back 3 steps. We do the hokey pokey, and we all did it because this is what God wanted. Then came along Joshua and said, okay, we do this dance, we do that dance. It made all the sense in the world because we had people that we can follow, and we saw miracles. We saw open miracles. Today, the miracles are much hidden. Even you take a 67 more, or you take an Entebbe or whatever, it always can be described within the realm of possibility within human nature. Sure, listen. 6-Day War. Why are you so surprised about the 6-Day War? You know what the military genius the Israelis have? What generals they had? The army, the strength, the force that they came down. It's a wonder they didn't kill him in 2 days. In 1 day, in 2 hours, 6 minutes. That's what it is. So there's always a possibility. So this, my friends, I also have to reject full out. I don't believe in the punishment theory at all. But we're getting closer. Paul, what are we doing? How are we doing?
It's about that time.
It's about the time. We'll take a minute break just to change the tape. Okay, we'll just take a 1 minute break, and we'll go on to if you want to take a drink. So we go on to issue number 3 and number 4. Before you know it, we'll all be home sitting smiling. We're back. We've been discussing the issue, of course, of the tsunami and the horrible after effects of what it caused to the world, and we've been talking about it in a theological question of why God allows this to happen. And we proposed that there were we advanced 2 theories. One, atheism, which we rejected outright, and then second, the possibility of it being a punishment, which we also rejected. So now we're going to go on to theory number 3. Theory number 3 is that God created the world. There's no question about that. That there absolutely was a first primal mover, there was a first cause. There's no question about that. God knew what he was doing. God is great, but he let the world run. Meaning that God is up there. In Hebrew terminology, it's called Ozav as Hashem es haaretz. God has left the earth. Absentee landlord. Meaning that there is a God, absolutely, and God, yes, is benevolent, and God is omnipotent and knows, but he sits up there and he chooses not to intervene. Where does this position get its theology from? It's because we again are faced with the same old issue. If bad things happen to good people, we have to say one of 2 things. Either that it's not bad things happening to good people, which we rejected because we know that it's bad things happening to bad people, but we rejected that. Or God is not benevolent. God is an angry God, and he's mean-spirited, and he likes to see people suffer, and he wants to do all of these things, and we can't accept that. We cannot accept that within Judaism, a God that gave us a kitten, a God who created wonderful things on this world and gave us the Torah and is so good. We cannot accept that this God is mean. So if he's not mean and he is benevolent and bad things are happening, how do we join the 2 together? How? So the answer is because God is limited. There's limitations to him. And he set the limitations. He created the world. He created man. He said, here's the book. This is what I want you to follow. And have a good day. See you later. I don't want to get involved. You guys are a bunch of crazies and all of that stuff. I put the laws of nature into place. Have a good day. I'm here, but I'm up there somewhere, and that's the way it goes. Now, this theology has a number of different names to it. One is called natural religion, or as we know it in American history, deism. Now we know a lot of our founding fathers, including the great Thomas Jefferson, and including Thomas Paine, and probably Benjamin Franklin, and several others of the leading theologians of the day, or not theologians, politicians of the day, they were not theologians, were what we call today deists. There's no more deism today. Very few people believe in deism today. Most people today in America are mainline Christians. What did deists believe? Deists believed in this idea of natural religion, that the human being is the ultimate in creation, that God created us with the capacity to become the greatest force on earth if we so will it. But he doesn't intervene. And Thomas Jefferson, who probably was one of the most brilliant people that ever came upon these shores here, actually wrote his own Bible. It's called the Jefferson Bible. I have a copy of it. I just recently bought a copy of the Jefferson Bible. I found it in one of my searches through the used bookstores in the local area. And I had read about it, but I'd never ever seen a copy, and they happened to have a Jefferson Bible. It's very interesting, because what Jefferson did was he cut out from the New Testament all of the miracles that were purportedly done by Jesus. He didn't believe in the miracles. He didn't walk on water. He didn't turn the water to wine. He didn't feed 5,000 people. He didn't do any of these things. But what he did do, according to Jefferson, was give us ethical, moral bearings. Yeah, that's what he did do. And Jefferson, being a Christian, I mean, he attended church, believed in that part of the Bible, that there is within our capacity to be good people, even though someone's always going to raise their hands. But didn't he own slaves? Yes, Jefferson owned slaves. Probably even had relations with his slaves. Yes, all of these things. But as we all know in history, you never judge history from this vantage point. You don't look back and say, you know what, in those days, you can't do that. Because I'm sure if Jefferson would have been living in 2005, he wouldn't have had slaves. So you can't judge the person from 2005 going back to 17 or 1802, 1805 or 1815. That's not the way it's done in history. So they believed, and a lot of people bought into this idea, that God said, thank you very much. Here's the keys to the car, my son. Have a good day. See you later. And there's no later. There's no seeing you later. And this is the way the world runs. Now, if we're good people, and we're founded, if you look at the laws of this country, we believe in the 10 Commandments, and to be good to each other, and all of these things. And Jefferson was a good politician too, and he knew when to throw in the word creator, and he knew when to throw in the word God, and he knew when to do all of these things, whether he believed it or not, I'm not here to say, but people bought it. But deism ultimately fell apart. Why? Because if you want to be a deist, you have to be willing to live a very straight moral life with no one watching you. Because no one's judging you. There's no one up there writing down everything that you do. It's up to you. And how many people want that? More people like to talk about salvation. Isn't that easier? Talk about salvation, being saved. I'm a bad person, but all I got to do is just turn to my daddy or whatever it is, and he's going to help me. He's going to save me. Don't we want to really believe in the power that God could change our miserable, pitiful lives? We want to believe that, don't we? See, Jefferson was a kind of a guy that said, I'm going to march forward, I'm going to do it, I'm going to stick to it, I'm going to go for it, it's me, it's up to me, I'm going to do it. But most of us are weak. Most of us need the crutch. What's the crutch? The crutch is what we call God, our big daddy. We're going to turn to him. Everything goes wrong, we say, oh, why, poor me, why me, oh God, come on, come on, come on. Why not get up and get a job? How about applying for a job, you bum? No, God will provide. How about getting some education, you bum? No, God will provide. Because everything is me, daddy. Daddy's going to take care of everything. Don't worry about it. It's the big daddy in the sky, and he's going to work. So natural religion is not for the faint-hearted. You've got to be willing to put in a day's work and an effort into it. So most people nah, I want to be saved. I want to be taken care of. And I don't care if it's Christians or Jews or Muslims. That's the way it is. We want to come on Yom Kippur. You ever wonder why? How many Jews are here in Shul on Yom Kippur? You never see them the rest of the year. Because they want to feel that they want to feel that atonement. They're going to come to Shul. They're going to sit there. They're going to buy their way into heaven. They're going to say, oh God, forgive me. I did this, I did that, I did that, I did that, I do. All of that stuff. They like that. They want to feel that comfort. Not many people want to believe in a natural religion until something happens to them. Then their whole focus changes. And if you've ever read a book by Rabbi Harold Kushner, why bad things happen to good people, he's of this opinion. He's of this opinion that God created sickness, but he doesn't intervene. He doesn't say, you're going to get sick, you're not going to get sick, you're going to do this, you're not going to do that. It doesn't, no, forget about that. That's totally not in his purview. Why? Because I think the theology of our Rabbi Kushner came from our own personal experience. Because personal experience is more important than anything else in the world. See, if we sit on top of a mountain like a guru and nothing ever happens to us, we have a different view of the world. But if we're in the trenches, if you're a chaplain in the army and you're now going to be in Iraq, your theology is going to be very different than before you went to Iraq. Very, very, very different. Because you see the ugly side of what humanity is all about. They tell a story in the Talmud that there is a commandment that we need to bless God, and not only bless Him, but thank God for the bad things that happen to us as well as the good things that happen to us. Well, is that easy to do? No, because good things, oh, thank God, thank God, thank God. Bad things, no, we don't want to thank God. So there was this Rosh Yeshiva. A Rosh Yeshiva is the head of a yeshiva, a very religious man, who was the head of this big school, of this big rabbinical school, and as well, he was a very wealthy man. And one day, his entire fortune was wiped out. That was unbeknownst to him, but his students knew. And they discussed among themselves, who was going to tell him? Who was going to walk up to the rabbi and say, Rabbi, you're a poor man? I mean, because he was a wealthy man. So they picked his prize student, the one that they knew that he loved, almost like a son. He was brilliant. And they said, you're going to go break the news to him. So he thought, how is he going to break the news? You can't just like walk in there and say, you're poor. You're going to have a heart attack. You can't say that. So he sits down with him. He says, Rabbi, I have a question I need to ask you. It's been bothering me. In the tractate of Brachos, in the Talmud, it says that one must thank God for the bad things that happen to them as well as the good things. Do you believe that, Rabbi? The rabbi says, of course I believe that. Are you kidding me? Absolutely believe it. And the student says, but Rabbi, how is that possible? Because the rabbi said, well, you have to realize, my son, that even though in our own human experience this might be called evil, but whatever God visits upon us is really good. And the student says, but Rabbi, it's still very hard for me to believe that if someone breaks his arm, we could say that that's a benevolent act. Yes, my son, because if he wouldn't have broke his arm, then he would, who knows what. This makes him stronger. Everything that we talked about in the past hour, the student was bringing out of the rabbi. He was taking him, he was asking him all of these hard questions, and the rabbi was answering him according to the texts. And then the student says, after an hour of baiting the rabbi and getting him to admit that there's nothing bad in the world, the student says, Rabbi, you lost your fortune. You're a poor man. What did the rabbi do? He fainted on the floor, flat out. When the student awoke him and he poured some water on him and he got him up and he said, Rabbi, for an hour you've been explaining to me how it's important for a person to bless God for the bad things that happen to them as well as the good things. But what, Rabbi? You just fainted. He says, of course, that's because it's in the book. But what happens to you, it's very different, my friend. And that's the way it works. So, of course, it's easy for us to say that God is benevolent and great and nothing bad happens to anybody and it's only an illusion. If something bad, it's all good. When it's in the book. But when we walk outside in a snowy Montreal day and we slip on the ice and hit our glutamus maximus on the floor, oy, 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 that's not in the book. That hurts. God, that hurts. Right? That's a stinger, as we used to call it in the olden days. Or when you lick the pipe and your tongue gets stuck to the pipe, for those that grew up in the Northeast and you know all these dumb things that we used to do as kids, and you lick the pipe and then all of a sudden you're stuck. That hurts. Okay, that's not an illusion. That's not an illusion. I see the Californians are saying, what's he talking about here? You know, what licking of pipes? What is this? It's good. But in the Northeast, when it gets really cold in the winter, you lick a pipe, your tongue gets stuck to it, and it's painful to get the tongue off. Only idiots do it. But anybody that's ever been born in Canada is a born idiot. So obviously that's a conclusion. So therefore, when it happens to someone else in the book, you don't have to worry about it. But when it happens to you, all of a sudden your thinking and your experience is completely different. And this is why this theory of God being limited and of Him not really getting involved holds so much water with these people who have experienced it. Now I have have to admit to you that sometimes it's very comforting, right? Because you look at Indonesia, God is up there, yes, there is a God, and He created the world, so we don't have to worry about the atheism. He gave us the Torah, so we have the absolute morality, God said don't do it, and all of that stuff. Yet, He doesn't want to get involved. He allows it to happen. So if we get sick, we get sick. We don't get sick, we don't get, that's the way it works. And therefore, I don't have to worry about, look at that good person that's suffering. Isn't it terrible? And why does God allow it to happen? God doesn't allow it to happen. Ozav Hashem es haaretz, God has left the building. Right? That's the way it is. He's gone, and He'll be in Vegas till Thursday. Enjoy the roast beef. All right? That's the way it goes. Now, for some people, they find that very comforting. I can't buy that, because if you understand the theology of this, it's almost, and it kind of borders, almost, you're walking a very thin line between that and pantheism. What's the difference when we talked about Spinoza, when we talked about God not being existent at all and allowing things to happen near a statistic, or God sitting there in His throne and he's like, standing there like with this pose and the world is going on? What's the difference? If He's not involved, if He's not an interventionist, what do I need Him for? Who cares about Him? If I wake up in the morning and I say, Maidahani, I thank God for restoring my soul, and He doesn't get involved, what do I need to pray to Him for? What's the use of all of this? So we go through this little gimmicky thing that we say, religion, you got to pray, but really doesn't help because that's the way it goes. That's the way He chooses to do it. And I don't want to debate the theology. If this is what they want to believe, they want to believe. But for me, it doesn't make much sense. I want to believe in God as an interventionist. I want to know in my life that I have someone to turn to. Maybe I'm that kind of a person that wants Big Daddy to protect me. I always want that Big Daddy to be around so I could turn in a moment of whatever it is. Whatever the reason is, I choose to believe that God is an interventionist, that He knows what's going on, He cares about the world, He's involved in the world, and not only is He involved in the world, but many of the things He's directing in the world. He gives us free choice, just like Cain had in the beginning of Genesis. He tells us, you have the free choice, but there's certain things that are out of our free choice. Like, we walk across the street, get hit by a car. God wanted you to get hit by a car. That wasn't free choice. God directed a car to hit you. Now, why did it hit you? So now we go back to the key question. So now that we rejected atheism, we rejected the punishment theory, and we rejected the non-interventionist theory, or the natural religion theory where God is up there, we come to the traditional idea of God within Judaism, and within, I believe, the prophetic idea of what God is all about. Meaning that God is here in the world. And not only is He here in the world, but He's recreating and infusing His power in the world at every single moment. There's no time that God is at all able to take Himself out and the void of the world, because if that would happen, I believe the universe would cease to exist. God has to be here and continuously pumping the energy into the universe to keep us going. Because we ourselves are not real existence. We are a made-up thing. God was there, and all of a sudden, poof, He created us, and we are dependent upon Him. And as long as we are dependent upon Him, we are not what we call in philosophy or Hasidic philosophy a true existence. Only an existence that is not non-dependent upon anything else for its own existence. I'm sorry to throw you in some philosophical jargon over here, but it's important to understand that only an existence that doesn't depend upon another existence for its own existence is true. Something that I say, I need air to breathe, right? If I don't get air, I'm finished. I'm not a real existence. I'm dependent upon the air. The air is dependent upon something else. So only the God Himself is the true existence. And therefore He is forced to pump in the energy into the universe to keep it going. Now, we go back to the key question. If this is so, if God is here and He's an interventionist and He listens to us and He cares about us and He listens to our prayers, explain the tsunami. Okay. So here is where our theology, we skate on very thin ice. Because what we do is, we throw up a detour. Okay? We don't want to face the question head on. I don't want to face it. I'm not thinking about it. My question is not why. I don't want to deal with the why. because I have no answer for the why. The prophet Isaiah says, Ki loy machshavosai machshavosechem. My thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways. I am different. My cheshbonis, my accounting is something that you will never know. You have no right, and it is far from you to know my accounting of what goes on here in the world. Why does some shmegegi go out there and win $60 million in his lottery, and some good people suffer? That's my business. That's not your business. And when you understand that, and you can appreciate that, and then you take a lesson, because what is the overriding idea of this question in our lives is the Holocaust. Because the Holocaust throws at us more than anything. That when we went to visit the Museum of Holocaust, you could see the depravity of what human beings can do, and you say to yourself, how could God have allowed this? Even with the saying that there's evil in the world, how could God not have given Hitler one bullet in the head? In 1933, if someone would have just put a bullet in Hitler's head, he would have saved 50 million people. One bullet to his head would have saved us so much anguish and so much tragedy and so much pain. And why God couldn't have done that, couldn't have arranged that. But the answer, my friend, is not where God was in Auschwitz. Where God was in Auschwitz is his business. My business is how I relate to that question. What do I do with that question? I look at the tsunami right now and I say to myself, I could sit over here and become, you know what, very pompous and say, well, you know what, God didn't save these people. Therefore, what I'm going to do is, it's a free-for-all here in the world, and I'm going to grab mine, and whatever I can get, that's the lesson of the tsunami. So before I get swept up by the next earthquake, here in California, I'm going to do whatever I can to make it my world. All right. You could take that position. Or you could take the position of, how do we really honor the 150,000 people that are dead? Where God was, what God's accounting, we're never going to answer that question, unfortunately. Because we're going to be sitting here till the cows come home, or till our faces turn blue, or any other, of those old, what do you call those, what's the word I'm thinking of? Okay, thank you very much for your help out there. Okay, thank you. You've been a very good audience. All of those quick little thoughts that we call, we could sit here.
Cliches.
What cliches? Good. Cliches. Thank you very much. All those cliches will never come to the answer. Do you know why? Because it's not our business. The Rabbi, one time in an interesting talk, didn't discuss the Holocaust much. Didn't want to talk about the Holocaust much, but once he was discussing the Holocaust and he said, do you want to know something? I'm not God's lawyer here on earth. I'm not here to defend God where he was in Auschwitz. I am here to make sure that the memory of the 6 million don't go for naught. So if you take the position of the atheists, well, they were a number, that's it. They're gone in the history and goodbye. If you take the position it was a punishment, I become cynical, angry, and bitter. I mean, how could 1.5 million children go into a furnace for no reason? If I take the position that God doesn't have any purview, he doesn't want to get involved, then there's no reason to pray. But even the person that was sitting in Auschwitz and said, I believe in the sun even though I don't see it shine, and I believe in love even though I don't see any here, and I believe in God even though he has turned away from me, my position is that I need to take all of these tragedies in the history of the world and turn them around in my life. And to say that I am not going to succumb to the Nazi idea that, I'm going to become bitter and I'm going to, or lash back. How many times as a kid wished that I could drop an atomic bomb on Germany? You can't imagine how many times I fell asleep with the wish that I was in a plane and I had an atomic bomb and I could drop it on Berlin. Oh, if I could do that, my friends, I'm telling you, I would be the happiest person in the world. Why? Because what did I grow up with? I all grew up with hating the Germans. Because look what they did. My family, my grandparents, my uncles, my aunts, everybody completely wiped out. And I thought that the best thing that I could do was revenge. Drop a bomb on them and let them feel what it meant to really suffer. Is that a normal thing? Is that a normal way to live life? To wish other people to suffer? No, I don't think so. Because if that's what it's all about, then we might as well close up shop and forget about it. But the real theology of traditional Judaism will tell us that the question is, when we look at a tsunami, when we see this tragedy on earth, our reaction to that is not the question of where is God, but the question that we need to answer is, what am I going to do about it? What am I going to learn from this and seeing and hearing about these things? It's too late for the 150,000 people. Their hopes and dreams, unfortunately, are gone. But we are still alive. We are still living here in this world, and we are stuck here. There's no other place to go. Believe me, if we already had space capsules that went to them, we had a colony on the moon, I'm the first to show up. I'm ready to go. I'd love to live on the moon because this is a crazy world and I want to get off it. But this is not an option. We live here in the world, and we are interdependent upon each other. As much as we're not, Bill Gates still needs that cow in California to give milk, right? If he wants his coffee with milk, he ain't going to get it out of his system. Microsoft 2000 cannot give milk. It can't do a lot of other things either, Mr. Gates, all right? But certainly it cannot give milk. You can't eat it. You can't do anything. He still needs, even Mr. Gates with his $40 billion needs that poor schlepper farmer to produce the strawberries for his strawberry daiquiri, if he likes it. Why? Because we are all interdependent upon each other. And the key that a religious person asks, and what a religious person wants to know, is what can we do in the world to make it a better place? The question of why is never going to be answered. You can look through 1,000,000 books and listen to 1,000 speeches and live 1,000,000 years. But unless you have the power to enter into a sphere that no other human being was able to enter, that means you are going to enter into the realm of the Almighty, which says in the Talmud, Ili Yedaiti Hayisi, which basically means if I knew, I would be. Means if I knew why this happened there, I would be God. And since we're just a little bit short of God, even the greatness as that was Moses, and the Talmud says he was just a little short of God, he also didn't understand it. The incumbent thing upon us to do is to live our lives the way the victims would want us to live our lives. To show the world that yes, tragedy happens, but the tragedy of a tsunami, or the tragedy of an earthquake, or the tragedy of a Holocaust, or these tragedies will not deter us from making this world the best place that we can possibly live, and telling our children to do the same thing. To turn bitter, angry, morose, and melancholy is exactly what Satan wants. That's when he wins. The Hitlers and the Stalins of the world would want us to think of these people as a statistic. Think about that. Think, what Stalin said was 1 is murder, 1,000,000 is a statistic, because he would want you to think, when he butchers 20 million people, he doesn't want us to think of 20 million individuals. He wants us to think of this huge number, so it doesn't make any difference to us. But when I look at this tsunami, and I look at the faces of the people on the television, I say to myself, I'm going to bond with them. I'm going to relate to them. I'm going to relate to that woman, that father, that grandmother, that child who lost his parents, to every one of those people. And I make a commitment to them that I will live my life either by giving money, being a better parent, being a better husband, doing some more charity work, worrying about some other things. For those that want to go over there, there's Doctors Without Borders. There's so many people that have given so much of themselves and so much money of themselves. This is really the answer to the question of what it's all about. So when we started off this lecture tonight, and I'm sure it's no surprise to you of where I've come down on, I'm sure it was whether it's God's hand or whether it's the natural force of nature, obviously it's God's hand. But His hand is telling us, my friends, these are things that are outside of your purview. There are things that you cannot control, only I control. The next earthquake, may it never happen. The next tsunami, may it never happen. May the next plague never happen. May the next death never happen. But if it does happen, we will still hold fast to our faith of what God is here as Jewish people. And that is by telling the world that we continue to live even in the face of disaster. And when we are able to do that, then we are victorious and we're able to go on. Because if not, then the good Satan that talked about Job, he wins the battle. So let's not allow that to happen. Let us not allow the memory of the 150,000 people that died, or 160 or 180, or again, who knows how many. But let us live our lives the way God wants us to live our lives, and hope that He spares the world from further calamity. Good evening. Now, the key is the questions. Come on. Okay, David.
What do you think about how Jefferson answers this by this quote from the Declaration of Independence? And I quote it to you. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established, cannot be changed for light and transient causes. And all experience has shown that mankind is disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable, tend to abolish the forms of government which they are accustomed to.
So you know what, we'll deal with that next week because we're dealing about government, right? So when government makes us suffer, we'll deal with that, all right? Because he was talking about suffering in a different sense that we're talking about suffering. So therefore, we'll deal with it next week and when we talk about government and what the role of government is in mankind, all right? Okay. But go ahead.
If we accept the fourth approach,
Right.
view, that when bad things happen and that it's just inappropriate to ask why, that's outside of our purview, doesn't also follow that when good things happen, the birth of a healthy child, the creation of the state of Israel, those kinds of things, that it would be inappropriate to think that those happen because of as a reward for our good actions?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. I would agree to that. I would agree just because, you know what, we are successful, or we are, we're living the good life, or whatever it is. It happens to me because I'm such a good person. I don't agree with that. I don't buy that. I mean, because you have to be careful also, because once that happens, you know what, God is shining His graces upon me now. In a very simplistic way, certainly when people are living the high life, they want to just. My suggestion to them is stay out of the way and let God shine His graces upon you. Just don't interfere. So so check what you're doing. Be kind, do the right thing. Don't give God an excuse to say, hey, why am I giving this guy all this money? This no good Nick. So if God is shining your graces, do something that will. At least it'll continue to give God a reason. Why? Because if we talk about money, it's all a matter of distribution. You think about it. We distribute the money. This guy got it here, this guy got it there, this guy got it there. But I agree with you 100%. If we're not going to say, you know what, we're going to say bad things happen, not because he's punishable. The person that wins is all because of God's good grace, and not because of something that he did now. If you look in the Talmud will tell us many stories of people that did a mitzvah and they were saved. Like, for example, it says, Tzedakah tatzel memovis. Charity saves one from death. Now, what does that really mean? And it's quoted over and over again. What do you mean charity saves someone from death? So there's a story with Rabbi Akiva and his daughter, and she was destined to die the day of her wedding, and then she had this long pin that she was going to stick into her hair. She stuck it in her bag, and all of a sudden with this pin, she killed the serpent that was going to come and bite her, that was going to die. When she opened up her bag, she saw the dead serpent. She brought it to her father. Her father, of course, was a great Rabbi Akiva. He said, you know what, I foresaw that you were destined to die today, but tell me what you did. So she told him, I woke up this morning, and on the way to the banquet hall, I saw a poor person, and I gave him some money, and I made him breakfast. So the father said to her, of course, tzedakah tatzel memovis, that charity saves one from death. Now, if we think about that, what does that really mean? That means that since God is an interventionist, as we talked about, and He said, you know what, this guy is destined to do, doesn't mean that the person themselves, through their own deeds, can't help themselves. Certainly a person could help themselves. It's not completely random where we say we know nothing. But sir, just like if you're going to go to a court of law, or you're going to go to a doctor, and the doctor says to you, listen, my friend, you're overweight, you smoke, you drink, you carouse, all of these things, it's not good for you. Chances are, if you continue this, you're going to die. And the guy lives to 99. What do we say? The doctor was wrong? No, the guy got lucky. The guy got lucky, because most people, if they live this lifestyle, are going to die by 70. So what does it mean? That means that when we do the mitzvahs, when I give charity, when I put on tefillin, when I'm kind, when I keep Shabbos, when I keep kosher, all of these things are there to somehow give me good standing in God's book. Meaning that if God says, you know what, let's take a look at Perelmuter, what he's been doing what he's up to lately, and he sees, this guy, okay, you know what, so that thing that I wanted to send upon him, we'll postpone it for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I believe that, because I do believe that our actions have a direct effect upon, now, sometimes God will say, you know what, this guy, I don't want to use me, I don't want to use anybody here in this room as an example, but this guy lived long enough. I remember when there was a great author, I think, Bob, you bought the book, The Living Torah, what's his name? Kaplan, thank you very much. Kaplan, not Mordechai, Aryeh Kaplan, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan was a great scholar, put out so many wonderful books, and he died a young man. And I remember the outcry of when he died, and the thought was, you know what, if this guy had lived another 20 years, how much work this guy could have produced, what he could have produced in the world. As it was, he was a young guy who was putting out book after book after book after book, and it was brought so much pleasure and Yiddishkeit. He was doing God's work. But for whatever reason, God said, you know what, Rabbi Aryeh, you have accomplished your thing here on earth, and you're gone. That's it. Now, why should he have died? Come on, God, let's be honest. If you needed somebody that day, there's about 500 million people that I could think that should have died before him for good reason. But no, he decided to take him. And for all we know, he was destined to die 10 years before. He should have been destined to die maybe in the 30s. But God said, you know what, I'll let him go. And because of his books, because of what he did, he was able to extend his life even a little bit further on. So, even as we talk about the seemingly randomness of acts that happen in the world, and we can judge the person that these things are happening to. So on this side, if a person's suffering, we can't say because he's punishable. Or on this side, like Mark, you said, if a person is being rewarded, we don't say because you're a good guy. But still, in the middle, there's a whole body of works that we believe in the Torah that helps us. That for whatever reason, they're like protecting us. Now, sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But if we were able to see from a vantage point, we probably would be kind of get a glimpse that if the person, and I'm walking here again, I'm walking literally on thin ice, and just be careful of what I'm about to say. But if you see the person acting good, there is probably somewhere along his life where those good deeds did come to protect him. He might have died early, or he might have done this, but somewhere along the line, I don't want to believe that it's totally random, but somewhere, but I can't see it. I have to be standing over here like this, like maybe if I be a little taller. Oh, now I see what's going on, in the world. But down here, that's the way it works, unfortunately. So I agree with you that it works both ways. So I'll make a long answer to a short question. Bob?
In Jewish theology, is there any concept of balance, the good and the bad balance, even though it may not be obvious?
Absolutely. Balance is what God created. Now, what's not in balance is our actions. What is in balance is our potential. Okay? So what I mean by this, God said, I want you to keep kosher. Okay? So what he does is he creates a cow, and the cow is kosher. Then he creates a deer. The deer is kosher. Then he creates a pig, and the pig is not kosher. Why did he have to create a pig? Would the world be worse off if there was never a pig created in the world? I'm sure the pigs probably wouldn't agree with me, but if there was no pigs in the world, would anybody say, hey, we need pigs? No. But what happened was God created the potential, the balance here of kosher, not kosher. Yes, no. All of those things are in the world in an equal balance. For everything that God commands us to do, there's an opportunity to reject it. That is what God created in the world. You have people that he creates a kitten, he creates a wasp. He creates a beautiful little dog, and he creates a tarantula. Now, you take a tarantula, who wants to have it as a pet? Nobody. I mean, you're going to come in there and they kill you. He creates a beautiful little fawn, and he creates a lion that rips the fawn apart. All of these things in the world are created within a balance. What's not created within a balance that is totally in our purview is how we relate to all of these things, our actions. Now, most people in the world, certainly in America, because we live in a society that we don't like really extremes. We like most people to live in the middle. We don't like our politics extremes, even though today it's a little bit different. We like to live as a balanced, neutral country. So most of us would fall into this category. If you said, "Is this a good person?" Most of us think of ourselves as good people, right? Who thinks of himself as a good person? We're not going to drown kittens. We're not going to hurt. We're not going to trip anybody while it's dark. All of these things. So those things we kind of are in a balance. But if we took everybody individually and said, "Okay, let's take your day. Let's see what you did today. You satisfied yourself 12,000 times, and you did a favor for somebody else 2 times." That's not in balance. Because those things are totally in our purview. But Hashem created the world definitely with a yin and a yang. And within ourselves as well, the capacity to do good, and everybody here has the capacity to do evil. Everybody here. Everyone in this room has the capacity of, we criticize. Many times we criticize the Germans, for, if they weren't actively in the SS, they acquiesced. Right? You read Donald Goldhagen's books, Hitler's willing executioners, that it couldn't have happened unless the German people were behind him. But I think to ourselves, let's just say for a moment that a dictatorship takes over here in America. Okay? And for whatever they are, they're hunting down left-handed midgets. Okay? That's their enemy. They're looking for left-handed midgets. Okay, and they want to exterminate every left-handed midget. And you're not a left-handed midget. You're sitting at home and you're enjoying your family. And then all of a sudden there's a knock on the door and this family of left-handed midgets shows up and they ask you to hide them in the attic. Would you? No one is jumping up. Everyone is thinking about it, right? We're thinking. It's not so simple. Have to hide a left-handed midget. What if the regime comes in? Are we willing to give everything up? They're going to come in and shoot us if they find the left-handed midget. It's not so simple, these issues. I was saying, as I told you, as a kid I grew up, I hated Germans. Didn't matter if good German, bad German. I just hated Germans because they were all part of Hitler's nefarious plan against the Jews. But it's not so simple when it comes to for us making a decision. I mean, if we lived back 200 years ago in this country as Jews, would we be abolitionists? Would we be the first people to jump on the train and to fight against slavery? Or would we be living down in Georgia in one of these big antebellum homes, and we'd be sitting there on a Shabbos with a big fat turkey, with kugel and a cholent and singing zmiris? So it was prepared by an African American who was a slave. Don't rock the boat. Right? Don't rock the boat. If this is the way America is, I'm going to say it. It took a man of tremendous character to be able to stand up and to say, this is wrong. Most of us, I can tell you, most of us, not everybody in this room, but most of us would be status quo. Let's live and let live. If this is what's happening, they're not going after the Jews. That's the way it is. So we all have that capacity to do evil. And we all have the capacity to stand by and see evil and not do anything about it. Right? What was the statement there in World War II? It was, when they came for the Jews, I didn't stand up because I wasn't Jewish. That when they came for the communists, I didn't stand up because I wasn't a communist. They came for the homosexuals, I didn't stand up because I was not a homosexual. They came for the infirm, I didn't stand up because they weren't infirm. They came for the Catholics, I didn't stand up. By the time they came for me, there was no one left to stand up. Okay? That's what's not balanced in the world. But Hashem did give us the potential to do.
Yeah, how does this idea about there's a pleasure in play measure us to what British philosophers such as David Hume, Jeremy Bentham, and Adam Smith, who says that in terms of the question of being fulfilling the self-interest versus the selfishness.
We completely reject it. We completely reject it because if you think about it, certainly you talk about in a society of capitalism. right? We live in a capitalistic society that in reality has no morals and ethics involved in it. You make money, look, Microsoft, God bless him. In this society, you have to say, good for him. He grabbed the market and he's holding it like a chokehold, and he's not letting go. And we're not making a moral or ethical statement about it. He did it. In Torah, we can't buy that. We can't buy unbridled pleasure and pain. Unbridled without a theology is impossible to exist. It's wrong. So therefore in the Torah, and we will see again next week in the role in government, we will see in the Torah that there's tremendous limitations. Even though by and large the Torah says, make money. There's no sin against making money. But the unbridled idea of capitalism, and without a balance, as Mom said, without a balance, a counterweight of morality and ethics instilled within the system, is going to go haywire in and of itself. And you know what? It doesn't take long, because generally empires last not that long. And now we're sitting now on top of the world. But if there's no balance here in this country, if we're not going to be able to somehow, balance out the 40 billion that one guy has and the homelessness of this other guy, we're in for a very short ride. Very short ride, in this country. There's got to be that kind of an idea. But if you're completely divorced of this and say, hey, you know what? You're on your own, survival of the fittest. It's over. It's a very thin line between that and Marxism. Very thin line between them. Because you know how political ideas go like this. And eventually they meet at this end. So Hitler and Stalin, even though they started out as political enemies, right? One was the extreme left in communism, and one extreme left in communism, and one was the extreme right in fascism. The difference between them was a hair. Only a hair. One called himself socialist, National Socialist. The other one called them the Bolshevik Revolution. But they all came back and they were the same thing. And that's the same thing what happens with unbridled capitalism. I mean, step over people, crush him. The people don't mean anything. So what do you get? Disgruntled proletariat. And all it takes is a guy to rise up like Marx, and we're back in full circle. All right? That's the way it works. All right. Are we ready? We had enough food for thought for this evening?